we notice that the Lord here was exercising two ministries and foreshadowing a third. This happened in the context of preaching and teaching. Therefore, the Word was distributing and nourishing with the Word. And there was great attention, and these people were being nourished. They had come a long way, and they were staying a long time. Hence the drama and the need to exercise this upper ministry of physical feeding of this crowd. We know, therefore, that only the men were being counted, and there were 5,000, so we can multiply that by wives and children, and we have some notion of the number involved. And yet it is quite explicit, 5 and 2 fish. We still have the rock on which that was placed. Those 2 fish and those 5 loaves were placed on the rock currently held in the monastery of the Benedictines of Germany, next to the lake of Tiberias or Galilee. And he looked up to heaven and engaged the power of the Blessed Trinity. He knew from the beginning what he was to do, for he participates in eternal providence as the Word. And as we come to the altar of God, we bear that in mind, that what he was foreshadowing, this third element of nourishing the centuries with his body and blood, by a multiplication of grace and an extension of the Incarnation through the miracle of transubstantiation, hid usually from our eyes, this is meeting us and will meet us until the end of our lives and of time. But the Lord is a humble God and hidden. Occasionally he does lift the veil, and to one mystic he explained that he would prefer not to have to do so, but it is because of our hardness of heart. Hence it is that we have not 1 or 2, but a great many Eucharistic miracles over the centuries, and they are still occurring. This same power then is right here before us at the altar, and the Christian centuries have reflected upon that power as they have developed, through the inspiration and guidance of the Holy Spirit, a whole language with which to surround and protect it, the liturgical life of the Church, East and West and all its diversity, and we find there precisely some elements in common to the centuries and to the geographical areas. One is an element of otherness, one other is an element of stillness, one other is an element of time, another is an element of chant and beauty, interspersed also with silence. In the East, that silence is sustained by practically uninterrupted chant. In the West, it is actually heard, because we are invited to have moments of silence in the liturgy, and in the old liturgy it was there inbuilt with many long pauses. Hence the people were educated to interiority. Now we mustn't think that we can jettison all this by thinking that we know better than the centuries. And those who are at peace in an unpeaceful celebration are reflecting their own lack of interiority quite often. They are coming for entertainment, and therefore more of the same thing. And they themselves may well be glorified in the process, and God left on the outside of the show. The very fact of giving applause is an indication of who is the centre of attention. The Church in its richness is other in its approach to God. Mysterium tremendum et fascinans. This unapproachable and yet somehow touchable mystery we have, for that separates us from the Protestant ethos that works essentially on the level of the brain and does not touch God in the same way. The Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox liturgy and spirituality has a notion of touching heaven through the material. The whole sacramental sphere is that. God has wanted to render himself approachable and touchable, but to do that he has also suggested a way of doing it through his Holy Spirit. We have to respect that language of the Church and not think that we can speak directly by shortcuts and think that we can be pleasing to that Blessed Trinity as though we knew more. So just an element therefore of delicacy, knowing that as we approach this cloud of mystery, we are approaching not an equal, but a superior, not a chum, but a creator, not just a brother, but also the supreme and final judge. And therefore we are judged by the way we handle him, and obedience to his will, and therefore true adoration, includes obedience to his expressed will, that is, that the rubrics and the will of the Church do oblige, and we cannot bypass them to please our God in a more direct way. Humility enters into true worship, and we cannot please the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, whom we celebrate in this Epiphany tide, without that humility of heart and indeed of body.